The twins' cries pierced the icy night. Barely wrapped in a threadbare blanket, 2 newborns lay abandoned in a rusted metal crate, half buried in the snow. Their skin was pale, their fists trembling against the biting wind, voices ragged from hours of helpless wailing. Nestled between them was a worn photograph, a faded picture of a young woman smiling weakly, her arms protectively curved around her pregnant belly. The photograph, though creased and smudged, was the only keepsake left beside the infants. The storm howled across the empty field, sweeping snow in blinding gusts. No houses, no fires, no warmth, only silence, punctuated by the thin, desperate cries of 2 children who should have been cradled in safety. From the tree line, a shadow moved. Sergeant Daniel Rourke trudged through the snow, his camouflage fatigues heavy with wet flakes, breath clouding the air. His face bore the weight of years, creased lines etched by grief and war. One gloved hand gripped a battered rucksack, the other resting on the rifle slung over his shoulder. His boots sank deep into the snow with every step. At his side trotted a German shepherd, ears high, eyes alert. The K9, Shadow, moved with a practiced rhythm, glancing often to his master. The soldier and his dog communicated with more than words, a flick of the eyes, the subtle shift of posture, a shared memory of battlefields that no longer existed except in Daniel's nightmares. Tonight, those nightmares pressed close. The storm's roar reminded him of mortars in Afghanistan, the shudder of collapsing buildings, comrades screaming through the static of broken radios. Each gust of wind was like the rattle of gunfire in his skull. His breathing quickened, his hands trembled despite the gloves. Then, Shadow stopped. The dog's ears pricked forward, a low whine escaped his throat. Daniel froze, every muscle tightening, as Shadow sniffed the air and veered toward the sound. At first, Daniel thought it was the wind again, shrieking across the frozen earth. But then he heard it. Thin, fractured, heartbreakingly human, the cries of babies. His pulse thundered. He sprinted, stumbling in the drifts, Shadow darting ahead. The crate appeared beneath a tangle of branches, nearly hidden by snow. Daniel fell to his knees, pushing aside ice with shaking hands. When he pried open the warped lid, his breath caught. 2 newborns, barely alive, their lips quivered blue, their tiny hands trembling as they wailed for a mother who would not come. One had his fist clamped around the edge of the photograph, as though even at this age he knew it was all that tethered him to the world. Daniel's chest clenched. In an instant, the war, the storm, the years of loss, all of it faded beneath the raw urgency of this moment. He ripped off his coat and wrapped it around both infants, cradling them against his chest. Their cries weakened into hiccuping sobs, tiny bodies pressing against the warmth of his skin. Shadow circled them anxiously, whining, pawing at Daniel's arm as if urging him to hurry. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, though his voice trembled. His eyes burned. "We got them! We got them!" The soldier's hands, scarred and calloused from years of battle, shook as he adjusted the coat to shield the babies' faces from the snow. He felt their fragile ribs rising and falling, each breath a miracle and a plea. He looked down at the photograph wedged between them. The woman's faint smile sent a dagger of memory through him. His own wife, pale and fading in a hospital bed years ago, whispering, "Take care of her. Take care of our girl." He had failed then. The child they never had remained an ache in his chest. But here, in the frozen wilderness, 2 abandoned lives demanded a second chance. The storm raged louder, as if the world itself wanted to swallow them whole. Daniel rose, cradling the twins inside his coat. Shadow pressed close to his leg, tail stiff, nose testing the air. There were other sounds now, crunching footsteps in the distance, not friendly, not safe. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. His soldier's instincts, dulled by months of trying to live quietly, snapped awake. Someone had left these children here. Someone who might not want them found. He pulled his rifle around, eyes scanning the tree line. Snow whipped across his vision, The footsteps grew closer. The twins whimpered against his chest. Shadow growled, teeth bared. Daniel whispered, "Stay quiet, little ones." "I won't let anyone take you from the darkness," a man's voice called, hoarse against the wind. "Leave them. They don't belong to you." Daniel stiffened. His grip on the rifle tightened. The babies whimpered again, clutching the photo between them. The soldier's breath came heavy, his chest tightening not from the cold, but from dread. Whoever this was, he knew about the children. He wanted them left to die. Daniel whispered fiercely into the night, his voice breaking. "No, not again. Not this time." Shadow stepped forward, hackles raised, as the figure in the storm grew closer. The figure emerging through the storm wore a heavy coat, hood pulled low, boots crunching in the snow. His silhouette swayed, half obscured by flurries. Daniel adjusted his grip on the rifle, one arm cradling the infants, the other steady on the weapon. Shadow's growl deepened, the sound vibrating through the night. "Stay back," Daniel warned. The stranger lifted his hands, but not in surrender. "You don't understand. Those children aren't meant to live. Walk away, soldier." Daniel's gut turned cold. It wasn't the storm, it was the words, sharp and cruel, spoken with such certainty that he knew this man had rehearsed them, had lived by them. His mind flashed to villages overseas where extremists had said the same about innocents, convincing themselves slaughter was destiny. "Who are you?" Daniel barked. The man didn't answer. He turned, melting back into the swirling dark. Shadow lunged a step forward, but Daniel hissed him back. The K9 obeyed, though his teeth remained bared. For a moment, Daniel stood frozen. The children stirred against his chest, one letting out a weak whimper, clinging to the photograph. The soldier looked down, his heart tightening. "We're moving," he whispered, adjusting his coat tighter around the infants. He turned toward the faint lights of town. The hospital was a squat brick building on the edge of the main street, its windows glowing like beacons against the storm. Inside, warmth struck his frozen face, nurses rushing forward as Daniel stumbled through the doors with the bundle in his arms. "Newborns," he rasped, "hypothermic. They need heat now." The nurses whisked the children away, placing them under radiant warmers. Their cries returned, louder now, defiant against the silence that had nearly claimed them. Daniel staggered against a wall, peeling off his snow-crusted gloves, watching with trembling hands as doctors inserted IVs, wrapped the twins in thermal blankets, and fed them sugar water with syringes. Shadow sat faithfully by his boots, tail curled around his legs, eyes never leaving his master. The door banged open. A woman strode in, hair damp from the storm, clipboard in hand. Clara Jennings, a social worker, her sharp eyes scanning the scene. "You brought them in?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Found them abandoned." Half dead in a crate, Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. She approached the warmers, gazing down at the tiny forms. Her voice softened. "Poor souls." Then harder. "But I've seen this before." "Someone wants them erased," Daniel straightened. "You're saying someone left them on purpose?" "Not just someone." Clara's eyes flicked to the photo clutched in one baby's fist. She pried it free gently, studying the face of the young woman. Her brows knit. "I know her. She filed a protection petition 2 months ago, claimed her partner, stepfather to her older child, was abusing her. She vanished before the hearing." Daniel's chest constricted. Vanished? Or silenced? Clara didn't answer. Her silence was enough. That night, Daniel sat in the waiting room, Shadow stretched beside him. He couldn't shake the echo of the stranger's words in the storm. "They don't belong to you." He'd heard the same tone in corrupt officers overseas, men who decided life and death with a shrug. His fingers twitched, the memory of battlefield radios screaming in his head. He pressed his palms together, forcing his breath to slow. PTSD clawed at him, dragging him back to Kandahar, to the day a child screamed under rubble and he was too late to save her. A hand touched his arm. Clara again, eyes weary but steady. They'll live. For now, Daniel exhaled. Relief washed over him, but only for a moment. Clara lowered her voice. If Victor Hale learns they survived, he'll come for them. Victor Hale? The stepfather. He's slick, manipulative. Everyone in town knows he's been exploiting military widows, fraud, siphoning death benefits. But no one talks. Sheriff Garvey looks the other way. Daniel's fists clenched. The weight of the rifle across his knees felt suddenly necessary. So the system won't protect them? Clara shook her head. Not unless we find proof. There's a ledger, her sister told me, hidden somewhere. Names, dates, amounts. If we had that, Hale's done. Without it, the court might hand those babies right back to him. Daniel's pulse hammered. Images of the crate, the storm, the helpless cries, they burned into his skull. Over my dead body! 2 days later, the hospital grew tense. A man in a pressed coat arrived, his smile too perfect, his handshake lingering too long with the administrator. Victor Hale. He demanded custody papers, insisted the twins were family. His eyes were like cold knives when they flicked toward Daniel sitting in the corner with Shadow. You a hired guard? Hale sneered. Or just a stray-playing hero? Daniel rose, every scar on his face etched deeper by fury. I'm the reason those kids are still breathing. Walk away, Hale's smile didn't falter. We'll see what the court says. Shadow growled low, and for a flicker, fear flashed in Hale's eyes before he masked it. He turned on his heel, leaving only the stench of arrogance behind. Clara whispered, He won't stop. He's going to use the system, and when that fails, worse. Daniel's jaw tightened. His hands trembled again, but this time not from trauma, from purpose. The twins cried from the nursery, their voices thin but insistent. Daniel looked through the glass at their tiny forms, fists waving as if demanding someone fight for them. I hear you, he murmured. I won't let you down. But in the hallway, footsteps echoed. Too many, too heavy. Shadow's ears pricked, his body snapping alert. Daniel moved to the doorway, rifle close, as the shadows of men fell across the hospital floor. The hospital lights flickered as the front doors swung open. 4 men stepped inside, snow clinging to their boots. They weren't staff. Daniel could see it in their stances. In the too casual way they spread out like wolves, circling prey. Shadow rose instantly, a growl vibrating in his chest. Daniel's hand fell to the rifle across his knees, the old rhythm of battlefield readiness returning as naturally as breath. The lead man, bulky with a scar curling across his cheek, spoke in a low voice. We're here for the children. No need for trouble. Daniel stood, blocking the nursery door. You'll have to go through me. A tense silence stretched. The nurses froze at their stations, eyes darting toward Clara, who had just entered the hall. She lifted her phone, voice trembling but firm. I'm calling the sheriff. The scarred man smirked. Sheriff Garvey already knows. Daniel's gut twisted. He remembered Clara's warning. Garvey looks the other way. Now he realized it wasn't negligence. It was complicity. The men advanced. Shadow lunged, teeth flashing, snapping at the closest intruder's wrist. The man yelped, stumbling back. In the chaos, Daniel shouldered his rifle. He didn't fire, but the metallic click as he chambered a round cracked through the hall like thunder. Last chance, Daniel growled. Out! Now. The men hesitated, anger flickering, but when Shadow lunged again, forcing them back toward the door, they retreated with curses, promising, This isn't over. Silence returned. Daniel's chest heaved, the twins' cries echoing faintly behind him. Clara stepped closer, voice low. We need proof, Daniel. The ledger. It's the only way to stop them. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the nursery, Shadow at his feet, his rifle propped against the wall. His eyelids fluttered, but every time they closed, he saw different images. Comrades dying, a child's hand slipping from rubble, the scarred man's smirk. The twins stirred, their small fists curling, their breathing shallow but steady. The photograph lay on the counter, edges curling with damp. Daniel picked it up, staring at the young woman's face. A whisper stirred in his memory, his wife on her hospital bed, the last words she ever spoke. "Take care of her. Take care of our girl." He had no girl to protect back then, but maybe fate had given him two now. The next morning, Clara returned with papers. "There's a warehouse," she said quietly, "on the edge of town. People say Hale keeps his books there. If we find it, we expose him." Daniel strapped his gear with the steady calm of a soldier preparing for deployment. Shadow sensed it too, pacing with anticipation. Clara looked nervous but determined. They left the hospital under cover of storm, trudging through alleys where the snow muffled every step. Daniel kept the rifle slung, his senses sharp, scanning rooftops, windows, doorways. The warehouse loomed grey against the blizzard sky, its roof sagging, its walls tagged with faded paint. Daniel pushed the rusted door open, the groan echoing too loud. Shadow slipped inside first, nose low to the ground. Inside, dust swirled. Crates lined the walls, stacked haphazardly. Daniel's flashlight swept across broken pallets, scraps of fabric, and then an office door padlocked. Shadow growled. Daniel knelt, pulling a combat knife from his boot. With a practiced twist, he pried the padlock free. The door creaked open, papers littered the desk, folders stacked high. In the center lay a leather-bound ledger. Clara's breath hitched. That's it. Daniel flipped it open. Rows of names, dates, amounts, widows, soldiers' children, falsified claims. And beside some names, chilling notes, resolved, removed. Clara whispered, "Removed means dead." Before Daniel could answer, the door behind them slammed. Sheriff Garvey stood there, gun drawn, eyes cold. "I told you to stay out of it, Jennings," he sneered. "And you, soldier, this isn't your fight." Daniel's blood surged. "Those children are my fight." "Always will be." Garvey cocked his pistol. Shadow snarled, crouching low. Clara clutched the ledger to her chest, eyes wide. From the shadows of the warehouse, more figures stepped forward, and among them, Pastor Martin. His clerical collar glinted faintly in the beam of Daniel's flashlight. "God forgive me," the pastor murmured, though his eyes betrayed no remorse. "But some lives are burdens, not blessings." Daniel's grip on the rifle tightened until his knuckles whitened. "You left them to die." In the snow. Newborns, Martin's smile was chilling. "And yet here you are, breaking yourself to keep them alive. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself if they'll ever be safe in this world." The storm outside howled, rattling the warehouse walls. Daniel's voice broke through, low and guttural. "Because every life matters. Because I won't fail them like I failed before." Garvey sneered. "Then you won't leave this warehouse?" He raised his gun, but before he could fire, Shadow lunged, teeth sinking into his wrist. The sheriff roared, weapon clattering to the floor. Daniel dove, tackling Garvey hard. The warehouse erupted into chaos, shouts, the crash of crates, the bark of Shadow as he tore through attackers. In the melee, Clara bolted for the door, clutching the ledger. "I'll get this out!" she cried. Daniel fought like a man possessed, every strike fueled by the cries of the twins that still echoed in his head. He slammed Garvey into the wall, rifle barrel pressed to his chest. But before he could finish it, another voice rang through the warehouse, weak, hoarse, but achingly familiar. "Daniel?" Daniel froze. He turned toward the source. From behind a stack of crates, a man staggered forward, bearded, gaunt, his clothes tattered, but his eyes unmistakable. It was Sam Blake, his old comrade, the man he had buried in his memory years ago. "Sam," Daniel gasped, lowering his weapon. The gaunt man nodded, tears cutting through grime. They kept me here." All this time his eyes flicked to the ledger. "And those babies, they're mine." Daniel's world spun, the cries, the photograph, the whispers. It all aligned into a truth more shocking than any battle he had fought. The twins weren't abandoned by fate. They were stolen from their father. and that father was his brother in arms. Daniel's breath came ragged. The weight of the revelation pressed on him heavier than the storm outside. He glanced to Shadow, who sat bloodied but resolute, to Clara, who clutched the ledger with desperate strength, and to Sam, barely standing but alive. Behind them, Pastor Martin hissed, "Kill them all before the truth spreads." Daniel lifted his rifle again, his voice raw with rage. "Over my dead body." The warehouse shook as the battle truly began. Gunfire shattered the warehouse silence. Bullets ricocheted off metal beams, sparks raining. Daniel dove behind a crate, dragging Sam with him. Shadow barked ferociously, lunging at one of the attackers. Clara crouched low, clutching the ledger as if it were her own heartbeat. "Get to cover!" Daniel roared. Sam stumbled, weak from months of captivity, collapsing against a wall. His voice cracked, urgent. "Protect them, Daniel." "My children. Don't let him take them." "Don't talk like that," Daniel hissed, pulling his comrade upright. "You're not dying on me again." Across the warehouse, Pastor Martin slipped away through a side door, his robe flaring like a phantom. The real threat emerged behind him, Victor Hale, no longer wearing his polished coat but a black parka, gloves tight, pistol gleaming in his hand. His smile was pure venom. "Well, well," Hale sneered, "the war hero, the mutt, and the ghosts of the past. How poetic." Daniel aimed. "Drop the weapon." Hale laughed. "Do you know how much those twins are worth? With the right paperwork, the right signatures, they'll fund me for years. And if they vanish, so much the better," Sam groaned, fury blazing through his exhaustion. "They're not yours!" Hale's smile faded. His pistol snapped up and fired. The crack split the air. Sam jerked, stumbling back with a cry. Blood bloomed across his side, staining the rags. Daniel's heart plummeted. "Sam!" He lunged, but Shadow was faster. The K9 hurled himself at Hale, teeth snapping inches from the man's throat. Hale cursed, stumbling backward, pistol flying from his hand. He slammed a knee into Shadow's ribs. The dog yelped, but didn't relent, claws scrabbling, jaws clamped on Hale's sleeve. Daniel raised his rifle, ready to end it, but another shot rang out from the rafters. Daniel dove aside as a bullet grazed his arm, heat searing through fabric. Pain flared. The scarred man from the hospital, the one who had first threatened him, stood above with a shotgun. Hale ripped free from Shadow, gasping, retreating behind cover. Clara screamed, Daniel, we have to go!" Daniel grabbed Sam, throwing his arm over his shoulder. Blood soaked his fatigues instantly. Shadow limped, but stayed close, eyes blazing with fury. Hale's voice rang out, echoing in the metal cavern. "You can't save them all, soldier." "You'll break, just like you broke overseas." Daniel's pulse hammered. The storm inside his head swelled. Gunfire, screaming comrades, rubble burying a child. His vision blurred, hands trembling on his rifle. PTSD clawed at him, threatening to pull him under. Then a sound cut through it all, the faintest cry. A newborn's cry, echoing in memory and reality, as if the twins themselves were calling across the night. Daniel blinked, grounding himself. His voice was low, guttural. Not this time. With a roar, he fired at the rafters. The scarred man ducked, losing balance. He toppled, crashing to the floor with a sickening thud. Shadow pounced, holding him down until he stopped moving. Hale's footsteps retreated, the side door slamming shut behind him. Silence fell, broken only by Sam's ragged breathing. Daniel knelt, pressing his hands to the wound. "Stay with me, brother." Sam's eyes fluttered. "Promise me, if I don't make it, protect them. They're all I have. You'll see them yourself," Daniel growled. "I'm not burying you twice." Clara crouched, tears brimming. "We need to move. Now!" Before Hale regroups, Daniel hoisted Sam, every muscle straining. Shadow limped at his side, blood dark on his fur. The dog's eyes met Daniel's, fierce and loyal even in pain. They burst into the storm, snow lashing like knives. The warehouse behind them burned with light as Hale's men set fire to cover their retreat. Smoke billowed, flames licking skyward. Daniel staggered through drifts, Sam groaning, Clara guiding them toward the road. Shadow pressed against Daniel's leg, his limp worsening. At the roadside, Clara waved frantically. Headlights appeared, a truck skidded to a stop. Inside, an elderly neighbor, Mr. Alden, his face lined with guilt. "I can't stay silent anymore," Alden rasped. "Get in." "I'll get you out." Daniel shoved Sam and Clara inside, then lifted Shadow gently, ignoring the dog's whines. He climbed in last, rifle still in hand, eyes burning. As the truck roared into the night, the fire behind them consumed the warehouse, sparks scattering across the blizzard sky. Daniel looked down at Sam, pale and trembling, clutching Daniel's wrist. "They told me I was dead," Sam whispered. "But you came." Daniel's throat tightened. "And I'll keep coming. For you." For them, Sam's eyes fluttered shut, but a faint smile lingered. In the darkness of the cab, Clara opened the ledger, her hands shaking. Pages fluttered, names glaring up at them. "This," she whispered, "is enough to end him. If we can live long enough to get it to the court." Daniel stared out into the storm, Shadow's head heavy on his knee, Sam bleeding at his side. The twins' cries haunted his ears, urging him forward. Hale wasn't finished, not yet. But neither was Daniel. The truck's headlights carved narrow tunnels through the blizzard, snow whipping so hard it seemed the storm itself wanted to drive them off the road. Mr. Alden hunched over the wheel, knuckles white, his breath fogging the windshield. Daniel sat rigid in the passenger seat, rifle across his lap, Shadow pressed close against his leg. In the back, Sam groaned, clutching his bleeding side while Clara tried to keep pressure on the wound. The ledger lay wrapped in a plastic bag beside her, its weight heavier than steel. The storm roared, but beneath it, Daniel's ears caught another sound. Engines. He twisted in his seat. Headlights appeared in the distance behind them. 1, 2, 3 vehicles slicing through the storm like predators on the hunt. "They found us," Daniel muttered. Clara's eyes widened. "Already? How?" Daniel didn't answer. He knew. Hale had eyes everywhere. Sheriff's deputies, town thugs, even people too afraid to say no. Alden pressed the accelerator, but the truck fishtailed, tires skidding on ice. "This old beast wasn't built for running," he growled. Daniel leaned out the window, snow slicing his face, rifle steady. He fired a warning shot into the storm. One of the pursuing trucks swerved, but the others pressed harder. Shadow barked, the sound sharp and urgent. In the back, Sam's eyes fluttered open, his voice faint. "Don't let him take them." Daniel turned, meeting his comrade's gaze. "Not while I breathe." The chase carved through winding roads, slick with ice. The truck jolted, every bump rattling through their bones. Clara clutched the ledger to her chest, shielding it as if it were the babies themselves. The pursuers drew closer. Bullets cracked against the rear of the truck, shattering the taillight. Clara screamed, ducking low. "Hold steady!" Daniel shouted. He leaned out again, fired twice. One bullet blew a headlight, the other pinged against the hood. The pursuing driver swerved but recovered, closing the gap. Alden cursed under his breath, sweat beading despite the cold. "Road narrows up ahead, bridge crossing the ravine. If we can make it, maybe the storm will cover our trail." Daniel's gut twisted. Bridges in weather like this were death traps. But there was no choice. The roar of engines grew louder. A pursuing truck rammed their bumper, the impact jarring everyone forward. Shadow snarled, bracing against the seat. Sam cried out, clutching his wound. Clara screamed, "We can't hold out!" Daniel turned back, his voice a growl of iron. "We're not losing them here!" The bridge loomed. A narrow wooden span stretched over a chasm, snow whipping across its length. Alden's truck lurched onto the boards, wheels skidding, the wood groaned under the weight. Behind them, the first pursuing truck followed. "Faster!" Daniel barked. Alden slammed the accelerator. The truck roared forward, boards creaking, snow blasting sideways into the abyss. Halfway across, the bridge shuddered. One of the pursuing trucks clipped the railing, splinters flying, but it held. Bullets whizzed past, striking the boards. Clara shrieked, shielding her head. Daniel fired back, one-handed, forcing the attackers to duck. Then a crack like thunder. The bridge gave way behind them. The last pursuing truck plunged into the ravine, swallowed by darkness. But the first still pressed forward, headlights glaring. Shadow barked furiously, sensing the collapse. Almost there, Alden roared. They burst onto solid ground just as the boards behind splintered, chunks of wood crashing into the abyss. The pursuing truck swerved, barely making it across before the last stretch collapsed. Snow blinded the windshield. Alden swore, wrenching the wheel. The truck skidded sideways, sliding toward the edge of the ravine. "Hold on!" Daniel grabbed Shadow with one arm, bracing as the truck screeched to a halt inches from the drop. Everyone inside froze, breaths shallow, hearts pounding. The pursuing truck slammed to a stop behind them. Doors burst open, men pouring out, weapons raised. Daniel leapt from the cab, rifle blazing. Snow exploded around him as bullets ripped through the storm. He dropped one attacker with a clean shot, Shadow lunging at another, teeth flashing. Clara scrambled out, dragging the ledger, slipping on the ice. Sam, pale and trembling, forced himself out of the truck, clutching the door for support. His voice broke through the chaos. "Daniel!" Down, Daniel ducked just as a bullet whizzed past his head. Sam, shaking, fired a pistol Clara had shoved into his hands. The shot struck true. One of Hale's men dropped into the snow, but the victory was brief. Hale himself stepped from the pursuing truck, calm, unhurried, his parka snapping in the wind. He raised his pistol with deadly precision. "You should have left them, Rourke," he called. "Now you'll all die for nothing." Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle, but his hands trembled, the PTSD storm surging. He heard gunfire from Kandahar, saw rubble collapsing, a child's scream tearing his heart. His vision swam. Shadow barked sharply, slamming against his leg, grounding him. Daniel blinked, breath ragged. The storm receded just enough. "I don't break," he whispered, raising his rifle. The two men locked eyes across the snowstorm. Soldier and predator, both knowing only one would walk away. But before Daniel could fire, the ground beneath them rumbled. The bridge, weakened by the chase, collapsed entirely. The shockwaves split the icy road, boards and snow tumbling into the ravine. Alden's truck lurched, tires spinning. Daniel grabbed Clara and Sam, hauling them clear as the truck slid into the abyss. Shadow lunged after them, claws scraping ice. The pursuing truck teetered, then plunged, screams swallowed by the storm. Silence crashed down, broken only by the storm's howl. Daniel staggered to his feet, clutching his rifle, Shadow limping at his side. Clara clutched the ledger. Sam collapsed, blood pooling. Hale was gone, swallowed by snow and chaos, but Daniel knew this wasn't over, not yet. He looked at his wounded comrade, at the ledger, at Shadow's bleeding flank. His voice was low, steady. "We're still alive." "That means we keep fighting," the twins' faint cries echoed in his memory, urging him forward. The storm swallowed the road behind them, hiding the shattered bridge and the wreckage of trucks. Daniel trudged through knee-deep drifts, Sam slung over his shoulder, Clara stumbling beside him with the ledger hugged to her chest. Shadow limped ahead, leaving uneven tracks in the snow. Every step felt heavier, but Daniel pressed on, driven by the memory of the twins' cries. Their faces haunted him, fragile, trembling, demanding to be protected. After what felt like hours, the faint outline of a cabin emerged through the storm. A hunter's shack, long abandoned, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. "Shelter," Daniel rasped. His throat felt raw, his lungs burning. They forced the door open. Inside, dust and cold air. A broken stove crouched in the corner, a pile of firewood long since rotted. But there was space, walls and a roof above their heads. Daniel lowered Sam onto a moth-eaten mattress. Blood soaked through the bandages Clara had pressed against his wound. Sam's face was pale, lips trembling. "Don't—" "Stop," Sam whispered. "If I don't make it—" "Shut up," Daniel growled, kneeling beside him. "You will make it." Sam gave a faint smile. Still bossy. Just like before Clara knelt with them, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I'll try to find clean cloth. Maybe there's a med kit." She slipped away, rifling through cabinets. Daniel's hands shook As he tied another strip of fabric around Sam's wound, his old comrade's blood soaked his fingers, warm against the cold. Memories surged, dragging Sam through a battlefield years ago, promising he wouldn't let him die. That day, he thought he had failed. And yet here, Sam was, broken but alive. Sam's eyes fluttered open. The twins. They're mine, Daniel. Mine and Eliza's. She was going to testify against Hale. That's why she disappeared. He killed her, didn't he? Daniel's throat clenched. He didn't need to answer. Sam saw the truth in his eyes. Sam let out a shaky breath, grief twisting his features. Then they're all I have left. Promise me, you'll keep them safe. Daniel's chest tightened. I already promised myself that. Long before you asked, Shadow limped to Sam's side, resting his muzzle on the man's arm. The canine's eyes glistened with loyalty. Sam's trembling hand stroked the dog's head. Still the bravest of us all. Daniel exhaled, leaning back against the wall. The storm outside rattled the cabin like artillery fire. His pulse quickened, flashes of memory clawing at him, dust storms in Kandahar, the sound of roofs collapsing, a little girl crying in the rubble. His chest heaved. He pressed his palms to his temples. Shadow whined softly, padding over to him. The dog nudged Daniel's chest, pressing firmly until Daniel's breathing steadied. The bond that had saved him in war saved him again now. Clara returned, with a rusted tin box, hands shaking. Old medkit, morphine ampules, bandages. She set them down, working quickly with Daniel to stabilize Sam. For a while, silence reigned except for the crackle of a small fire Clara coaxed into life. Warmth spread, faint but real. Then Clara spoke, her voice trembling. Why does no one stop Hale? Why does the town stay silent? Daniel stared into the flames. Fear, money. People convince themselves it's not their problem. I've seen it in villages overseas, saw it in cities back home. Evil thrives when people close their eyes. Clara's lips quivered. I closed mine too long, not anymore. She lifted the ledger, its cracked leather glowing in the firelight. With this, we can end him. Daniel studied her face, seeing the resolve in her eyes. For the first time since the storm began, he believed it might be possible. But even as hope flickered, dread coiled in his gut. Hale wasn't finished. He would come. Hours passed. Sam drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering Eliza's name, sometimes the twins. Clara dozed against the wall, the ledger still clutched to her chest. Daniel sat awake, rifle across his lap. Shadow leaned against his leg, breathing heavy from his injury. The storm eased slightly, moonlight piercing through the cracks in the roof. For a moment there was peace. Then a crunch outside, snow shifting under boots. Daniel stiffened, Shadow's ears pricked, his body tensing despite the limp. Daniel crept to the window, peering through frost. Figures moved in the tree line, lanterns bobbed, the faint glint of rifles. His heart hammered. Hale had found them. He turned, voice sharp. Clara, wake up! They're here! She jerked awake, clutching the ledger. Sam stirred, groaning. Daniel scanned the room quickly. One door, one window, no escape. His mind raced. They couldn't run. They would have to fight. He crouched beside Sam, gripping his shoulder. Can you move? Sam shook his head weakly. Not far. Then we make our stand here. Sam's eyes burned with pain, but also pride. Wouldn't want it any other way. Daniel loaded his rifle, the metallic click echoing in the cabin. Shadow stood at his side, ready despite his wounds. Clara held the ledger, her face pale but fierce. The storm outside calmed, but the storm of men closing in grew louder. Daniel looked at them, his broken comrade, the fearless social worker, his loyal dog, and felt something he hadn't in years. Purpose. His voice was low, steady. They want to erase those children. To erase everything we stand for. We won't let them. Not tonight. The first shadow crossed the window. A hand reached for the latch on the door. Daniel raised his rifle, breath steady. Come and try, he whispered. The latch clicked. The door shuddered, and the cabin filled with fire. The cabin door shuddered under the first blow. Snow swirled inside as a figure kicked. It wide open. Daniel fired. The shot cracked like thunder, dropping the first intruder into the drift. Shadow lunged through the opening, snarling, tackling the second. "Stay down!" Daniel shouted to Clara and Sam. More figures swarmed outside, muzzle flashes lighting the storm. Bullets ripped through wood, splinters raining across the room. Clara ducked low, shielding the ledger with her body. Sam, pale and trembling, dragged himself to a better angle, clutching the pistol like it was his last lifeline. Then came a voice, cold and commanding, echoing through the storm. "Rourke!" Hale's snarl cut across the gunfire. "Hand over the ledger and the children's claim disappears. Resist, and you all burn." Daniel's chest heaved. You already tried to burn them, in the snow. In the cradle, they were left to die. In Hale laughed. And you picked them up. Fools like you keep the world messy. Tonight I clean it. A crash against the back wall. A bottle shattered, flames licking across the boards. Molotov. The fire spread quickly, feeding on dry timber. "Fire!" Clara cried, scrambling back from the flames. Smoke thickened instantly, clawing at lungs. Shadow barked furiously, darting between attackers and the growing blaze. Daniel fired again, his aim steady even as his mind began to unravel. The crack of rifles, the smell of fire, the screams, it blurred into Kandahar, into the rubble, into comrades he couldn't save. His chest seized, his vision narrowing. "Daniel!" Clara's voice pierced the haze. "Stay with us!" Shadow rammed against his leg, barking, anchoring him to the present. Daniel blinked hard, dragging himself back. He wiped sweat and soot from his eyes, focusing on the here and now. Clara crouched, terrified but fierce. Sam clutching his side, pistol steady. Shadow bleeding but unrelenting. They needed him. The door splintered again. Hale himself stormed inside, Parker scorched by firelight, pistol gleaming. His eyes locked on Clara and the ledger. "Enough!" Hale roared, aiming. Sam pulled the trigger first. His shot struck Hale's arm, spinning him sideways. Hale cursed, firing wildly. The bullet slammed into Shadow's flank. The dog yelped, collapsing with a thud. "Shadow!" Daniel roared, lunging forward. The K9 whimpered, but dragged himself upright, blood soaking his fur, teeth still bared at Hale. Loyalty burned in his eyes, a refusal to surrender. Hale snarled, steadying his aim again, at Shadow. "Don't!" Daniel's voice cracked. His rifle snapped up, finger tightening on the trigger, but then the roof above gave way, a beam collapsing in sparks and fire. The floor shook. Daniel staggered, the shot going wide. Hale lunged forward, knocking Clara aside, his hand clawing for the ledger. Sam fired again, but his hand shook. The bullet grazed Hale, not enough to stop him. Daniel hurled himself into Hale, both men crashing into the flames. The ledger flew across the room, landing near Clara's outstretched hands. She snatched it, pressing it to her chest. Hale and Daniel grappled, fists and fury colliding. Smoke choked the air, fire seared skin, but neither man yielded. Hale slammed Daniel's head against the floorboards, snarling, "You couldn't save them overseas! You won't save them here!" Daniel's vision blurred, the storm inside threatening to swallow him whole. Gunfire, collapsing rubble, a little girl's scream, his PTSD thundered. And then another voice, soft but piercing, cutting through the chaos. It was Sam, gasping from the mattress, his voice breaking. "They need you, Daniel. My children need you. Don't leave them like I did." The words cracked something open inside Daniel. He saw the twins in the snow, their fists clutching that photograph, their cries begging the world not to abandon them. His roar shook the cabin. He surged up, driving his shoulder into Hale, slamming him back against the flaming wall. Hale cursed, fists flailing, but Daniel struck again, every blow fueled by years of grief and guilt. Shadow limped forward, teeth clamping onto Hale's leg, dragging him off balance. Hale screamed, pistol tumbling from his hand. Daniel snatched it midair, pressed it against Hale's chest. "This ends now." Hale sneered, blood dripping from his lip. "You can kill me, but you'll never stop men like me. The world wants the weak erased." Daniel's finger tightened. His voice was steady, fierce. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life standing in their way." He fired. Hale jerked, the sneer frozen on his face, then crumpled into the flames. Fire consumed him, smoke swallowing his final scream. The cabin roared with fire. Daniel staggered back, coughing. Shadow collapsed at his feet, bleeding heavily. Clara crawled forward, Ledger still clutched. Sam slumped, eyes fluttering. "We have to go," Clara cried. Daniel hauled Sam onto his shoulder, ignoring the burning in his own lungs. With his free hand, he scooped up Shadow, the dog whimpering but still breathing. Clara shoved the Ledger inside her coat. They burst through the back door as the cabin collapsed, flames devouring it whole. Snow swallowed them, the storm dousing embers clinging to their clothes. They collapsed in the snowdrift, gasping, coughing, eyes watering. Behind them, the cabin was nothing but an inferno, sending sparks into the night sky. Sam's voice trembled. "Did we make it?" Daniel set him down gently, stroking Shadow's bloodied fur. The dog wagged his tail weakly, pressing his nose into Daniel's hand. Daniel looked at Clara, at the Ledger, at his wounded comrade. "We made it. But it's not over," Clara nodded, her face streaked with soot but resolute. "The Ledger gets to the court. The truth gets out. That's how we end it." The storm howled, but in its heart burned a fragile flame. Survival. Daniel lifted his gaze to the night sky. "For the twins," he whispered. Shadow whined softly, as if agreeing. The soldier, the dog, the wounded father, and the fearless social worker, together they had survived the fire. But the fight for justice had only just begun. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant, a strange blend of history and bureaucracy. Snow clung to the boots of everyone inside, dripping into muddy pools along the worn linoleum floor. Clara clutched the Ledger against her chest as though it were her own heartbeat. Daniel walked at her side, Shadow limping but proud, bandaged and refusing to be left behind. Behind them, Sam leaned heavily on a crutch, his face pale but determined. He had survived his wounds, though the doctors warned his body would always carry scars. His children's lives, however, were worth every ounce of pain. Inside the courtroom, voices hushed as the judge entered. The prosecutor stood ready, papers in hand, but Clara's Ledger was the crown jewel. "Your Honor," Clara said firmly, stepping forward, "this record documents years of fraud, payments siphoned, death benefits stolen from families like Daniel Rorke's and Sam Miller's, and it proves that Edward Hale orchestrated all of it." Murmurs rippled through the room. Hale's cronies, those still alive, those still hoping to escape consequences, sat stiffly at the defense table. Without their leader, they looked small, cornered, afraid. The judge adjusted his glasses. If this evidence holds, it not only confirms Hale's guilt, but implicates the network that enabled him. Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes scanned the gallery, catching faces he knew, neighbors, townsfolk, men and women who had turned away when the children cried. Some lowered their gazes in shame. Others stared back defiantly, refusing to admit complicity. Sam, voice hoarse, rose from his seat. "You all knew," he said, his words trembling but strong. "You heard my children cry in the snow. You saw them hungry, cold, left alone, and you stayed silent. Hale thrived because you let him. Silence followed." Then, from the back, an elderly man stood, Mr. Whitaker, the neighbor who had once looked away. Tears streaked his face. "I heard them. I told myself it wasn't my place. I was wrong." His voice cracked. "We were all wrong." One by one, others began to murmur, confess, apologize. The town's silence cracked open like ice in spring. The judge rapped his gavel. "Enough! The law will pass judgment here, but remember this moment. Silence is complicity." Hours later, the decision came swift. Custody of the twins granted to Sam, with Daniel as legal guardian and protector if Sam's health ever failed. The fraud exposed, Hale's allies convicted. The Ledger sealed into evidence that would ripple far beyond their town. When the gavel fell for the last time, Clara's shoulders sagged in relief. Sam wept openly, clutching the order in trembling hands. But it was Daniel who felt the heaviest weight lift. For years he had carried guilt like a second skin. Comrades lost, lives ruined, a war that never left him. Yet here, in this small courtroom, he had done what he thought impossible. He had saved someone. That evening, they gathered in Daniel's cabin. What remained of it, rebuilt with community hands. Snow still pressed at the windows, but inside, warmth glowed from the fireplace. Clara poured cocoa into chipped mugs. Sam sat in a chair, his children curled against his sides, their small fists clutching that same photograph. Shadow lay at their feet, stitches along his flank, tail thumping softly each time one of the twins reached down to stroke him. His dark eyes watched everything, protective as ever. Daniel stood by the fire, staring into the flames. He felt the tremor in his hands, the ghosts that still whispered when the wind howled outside. But tonight their voices seemed softer, fainter, drowned out by the sound of children's laughter. Clara approached, pressing a hand to his arm. "You did it. You brought them home." Daniel shook his head. "We did it. Shadow, Sam, you, even the town, finally." He exhaled, the weight of years leaving his chest. Maybe this is redemption." Sam lifted his gaze, weary but resolute. "No, it's family." Later, as the fire dwindled to embers, one of the twins stirred. The little girl's voice was soft, fragile, yet it cut straight through the room. "They told me I shouldn't exist." Every heart froze. Daniel knelt beside her, his hand trembling as he brushed the hair from her face. "Who told you that?" Her lips quivered. "The bad man. He said nobody wanted us, that we were mistakes." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice steady even as it broke. "Listen to me. You are not a mistake. You are wanted. You are loved. You are home." The boy twins stirred, whispering, "Home." Daniel's chest ached, but in that ache was something new, not guilt, not grief, hope. Clara knelt beside them, her arms wrapping around both children. "You'll never be left out in the snow again." "I promise." Sam reached over, his rough hands covering theirs. "And I'll never stop fighting for you." "Not now, not ever." Shadow pressed closer, resting his head in the children's laps, a low rumble of contentment in his chest. The little girl's eyes fluttered shut. "I'm not lost anymore," she whispered. Outside, the storm finally broke. The sky cleared, revealing stars sharp and bright against the black. Snow still blanketed the world, but inside the cabin, warmth reigned. Daniel stepped out onto the porch, looking up. The cold bit at his skin, but for the first time in years, he didn't flinch. He saw not a battlefield in the snow, but a home forged in fire, in loyalty, in sacrifice. Behind him, laughter rose, Clara's, Sam's, the twins. Shadow barked once, low and steady, as if to say, "All is well." Daniel closed his eyes. The ghosts whispered one last time, then faded into the night. He whispered back, his voice carrying into the stillness. "They're safe now. You can rest," and for the first time since the war, so could he.